Good evening to you. For TELEVISED, my name is Regan Devines. We begin with a look at this evening's headlines. Arabian and South American countries talk the stabilization of oil prices. Pedro Passos Coelho is no longer Prime Minister of Portugal after a parliamentary vote ousts his government. And another congressional defeat for U.S. President Barack Obama over Guantanamo. The details on these stories and more now on From the South. Thank you so much for being here with us. We begin in Saudi Arabia, where the UNASUR bloc has argued for a stabilization of world oil prices on the first day of the summit of Arab and South American nations in Riyadh. Oil prices have declined significantly since 2014, causing serious difficulties for exporters like Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia and Brazil. Ecuador and Venezuela have proposed stabilizing prices at around $80 per barrel to ensure oil field investments and to help strengthen the region's economy. The International Energy Agency says that it may take several years for oil prices to return to that level. Saudi Arabia has so far refused to cut production to boost prices.
The notable increase in trade between our two regions from $6 billion in 2004 to more than $33 billion now shows perfectly the importance of relation between the countries of South America and those of the Arab region. Nonetheless, we badly need to raise further the level of cooperation between us to achieve a qualitative leap in relations.
Para dar un salto cualitativo en las relaciones entre los países árabes y los países de América del Sur.
Vice President Raúl Sendic of Uruguay, which holds the presidency of the South American bloc UNASUR, stressed the importance attached to reducing inequalities in his region.
Otro aspecto fundamental para que reine la paz en nuestras sociedades.
Another fundamental aspect for securing peace in our societies, in which the member states of UNASUR are making a priority, is the reduction of inequalities within our countries. Sustainable development with social inclusion is our priority. Human and social development with equality, to eradicate poverty, to eradicate illiteracy, and universal access to quality education, are two of the main objectives written into the founding charter of UNASUR.
And the Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, told the summit that he would be presenting the General Assembly with a comprehensive plan to combat violent extremism, especially in Syria, Iraq and Libya. He also praised the advances made in South America to give women the opportunity to assume leadership roles. The FARC rebels in Colombia will stop all weapons purchases. This as peace talks between the rebels and the government enter a brief recess. The FARC's top leader, Timoleon Jimenez, known as Timoshenko, tweeted that weapons purchases had been halted on the 30th of September. The revelation comes as the guerrilla group urges the government to implement a truce ahead of a bilateral ceasefire. Colombia's second guerrilla group, the ELN, has published a video showing two soldiers they captured last month during clashes with the Colombian army. The video shows the soldiers speaking with a red and black ELN flag. Also in the video, the group urged the government to enter peace talks with them. A Colombian indigenous leader who was sentenced to 16 years for allegedly kidnapping a member of the military back in 2008 has changed his conventional cell for a prison in the heart of Mother Nature. The Colombian constitution guarantees indigenous justice with powers to try and punish crimes inside indigenous territory and according to their traditions. Feliciano Valencia maintains that his sentence is an abuse against the justice of native people. A delegation of Cuban representatives has been meeting U.S. government officials to discuss the next steps in renewing ties between the two countries. The representatives from both countries analyzed the progress made in the past few months and discussed issues such as financial restrictions, the U.S. blockade against Cuba, and other measures to normalize relations. The search continues in Brazil for victims of last Thursday's mudslides caused by the bursting of two mine dams near the town of Mariana in Minas Gerais state. 6 people are known to have died and another 21 are still missing. Search teams are focusing their efforts near the town of a 7-year-old boy who was living with his grandmother when the mud swept away their home. The mayor of Mariana says that he will demand financial compensation from all the mining companies involved, including the Anglo-Australian BHP and the Brazilian Vale.
We are demanding that the mining companies pay compensation to all those affected by this, not only Samarco. It is important to make this very clear because BHP and Vale are the controllers of Samarco. We are going to call them for a meeting so that both of them also take responsibility over this, not only Samarco. We understand that they too are part of this issue and will also play a role in the process of rebuilding these families.
And some footage filmed from a helicopter reveals the magnitude of the mudslide. The mining waste has continued to flow 400 kilometers down the Rio Doce River, destroying agricultural land and contaminating water supplies. State health officials are warning residents who come into contact with the mud to throw out their clothing. Biologists say the environmental impact may be permanent, devastating local fisheries and farms. Also in Brazil, indigenous activists have again been protesting outside Congress against the law known as PEC 2015 that threatens their land rights. The law would transfer the power to demarcate indigenous lands from the government and the indigenous communities themselves and vest it in Congress. A large group of pro-agribusiness lawmakers, known as the Bancada Ruralista, wields considerable power in Congress.
If the PEC 215 law passes, we won't have the right to live on our lands anymore. We won't have the power to govern our people. We won't be able to demand anything.
Argentina's presidential candidates Mauricio Macri and Daniel Scioli are preparing for a televised debate on Sunday, which could be crucial ahead of the second round vote. Both candidates have stepped up their campaigns. While Macri claims a change is needed, Scioli is promising to keep the current welfare policies implemented by President Cristina Fernandez. Scioli has also promised improvements in the economy. All workers and academics have come out in support of Daniel Scioli. And coming up after the break, Portugal's president will soon choose a new prime minister. But who will it be? That story and more coming up next. The left is poised to take over the government in Portugal after it voted down the program of the right. It is expected that Antonio Costa, the leader of Portugal's Socialist Party, will become prime minister at the head of a new left-wing coalition that includes the Left Bloc and the Portuguese Communist Party. The right-wing Prime Minister Pedro Passos Coelho, who has only been in office for 2 weeks, saw his legislative program defeated by 123 votes to 107. The left parties will now have the opportunity to end years of austerity. They have pledged to raise incomes, protect pensions, and stop privatizations. Despite strong Congress disapproval, a Pentagon report has identified prisons in Colorado, Kansas, and South Carolina for the relocation of Guantanamo detainees so that the facility could finally be closed. However, the Senate has passed a bill preventing the movement of Guantanamo prisoners to the United States. The bill also prevents the Obama administration from using funds to build or modify any prisons in the United States to house the detainees. The bill was voted on 91-3. Many Republicans now fear that President Obama will use his executive power to fulfill his campaign promise of closing the facility. A U.S. appeals court has ruled that a man who had been placed in solitary confinement over 40 years ago will stand trial for a third time. Albert WOODFOX, now aged 68, had been convicted for the killing of a guard during a prison riot back in 1972. A federal judge earlier ruled in favor of his unconditional release, citing reasons such as his lack of confidence in the state to provide a fair third trial, as well as WOODFOX's poor health. The court has also ruled that WOODFOX should remain in custody until the trial. Israeli politicians are fiercely opposing the European Union's labeling requirements on consumer goods made in Jewish settlements. About 1,000 Israeli companies operate in 20 industrial zones in West Bank settlements. The European Commission expects to issue guidelines as early as this week, by which products made in areas occupied by the Jewish state may no longer be marked "Made in Israel." According to the World Bank, easing restrictions on Palestinian production in areas under Israeli military control would add $3.4 billion a year to the Palestinian economy. And another Palestinian has been shot dead after he tried to stab a paramilitary border policeman at a checkpoint in the occupied West Bank. And in Jerusalem, another Palestinian man was shot while attempting to attack security guards near the walled Old City. The past 6 weeks of violence have resulted in the deaths of 75 Palestinians and 12 Israelis, as Palestinians continue with their knife intifada. Our correspondent Noor Harazin has more from Gaza.
Dozens of flow markers in the Gaza Strip organized Tuesday morning a parliamentary sit-in protest of Palestinians living in Jerusalem, as highlighted tensions against the Israeli occupation forces in the West Bank and Jerusalem continue since October. The protest took place at the Legislative Council headquarters in the Gaza City, in which dozens of flow markers from all Palestinian parliamentary blocs, such as Khalil Hayya, Ashraf Jum'a and Jamil Majdalawi, participated. For his part, the acting PLC speaker, Dr. Ahmed Bahar, delivered a speech in which he supported and praised the role of the Palestinian youths in developing the future course of the Intifada against the Israeli settlers and occupiers.
Our people, including men, women and children, will keep defending Jerusalem. This intifada will continue until the liberation of Palestine. Our people have seen the sacrifice of 80 people killed and about 3,000 injured. Still, Jerusalem needs more until it achieves liberation.
Meanwhile, tensions continued. Israeli media outlets reported that a security guard was moderately wounded after 2 Palestinian miners stabbed him with a knife at the light rail in Bisgad Ziyav settlement in Jerusalem. One of the boys was seriously wounded, while the other fled and was shortly arrested by the Israeli police forces. Noor Harazin, Television TV, Gaza.
The Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, visited Israel's official memorial to Holocaust victims and met Israeli President Reuven Rivlin at the beginning of his 3-day visit to the region. 15 London-based tech firms accompanied Johnson on his trip, aimed at strengthening economic ties with Israel and the Palestinian Authority. Later on Tuesday, he met with the first Palestinian woman governor, Laila Ghanem, in Ramallah. During the visit to Jerusalem, Johnson and Rivlin met with Jewish and Arab children who played football together.
I know that even if something goes wrong today, it won't really matter, because the important thing is that this initiative is bringing young people together through sport, through football, which teaches them discipline, friendship, self-esteem, and how to work as a team.
The British Prime Minister David Cameron has outlined his 4 goals for reforming the UK's membership of the EU, which includes restrictions on benefits for people coming to the UK. Cameron said that Britain faces a huge decision on whether or not it will remain in the EU, and a referendum is promised before the end of 2017. Anti-EU campaigners call the talks a gimmick. Cameron made it clear that if negotiations succeed, he will campaign enthusiastically to keep the UK in the EU.
I don't want this reasonable approach. I will campaign to keep Britain inside a reformed European Union. I'll campaign for it with all my heart and all my soul, because that will be unambiguously in our national interest. But if we can't reach such an agreement, and if Britain's concerns were to be met with a deaf ear, which I don't believe will happen, then we will have to think again about whether this European Union is right for us. And as I've said before, I rule nothing out.
At least 22 people have been killed and over 60 others wounded after fierce bombings in the usually peaceful Syrian city of Latakia. Authorities called it one of the bloodiest shellings since the war began. The Latakia area is symbolic to many as a regime stronghold, which many rebels and jihadists, including Al-Qaeda's Syria affiliate, have sought to target. Meanwhile, opposition members met in Damascus for their own talks on Syria's peace progress. Russian President Vladimir Putin says that Russia will take all necessary retaliatory steps to strengthen its strategic nuclear forces capabilities. He said this during a meeting on the defense industry in the Black Sea resort of Sochi. Putin said that the United States and its allies have not stopped construction of global missile defense systems, and neither Russian concerns nor proposals of cooperation have been taken into consideration.
Мы не раз говорили, что Россия примет необходимые ответные меры.
18 people have been detained in Turkey suspected of being linked with Syria's Al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front. Just days before the G20 World Summit in Turkey, a Turkish news agency said that the detainees are suspected of recruiting fighters for the terrorist group. And now a brief look at other stories making news around the world.
Former West German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt has passed away. He was best known as one of the founding fathers of the euro, as well as his handling of the far-left Red Army faction guerrillas that terrorized the country for over 30 years. Schmidt died at the age of 96. UNHCR field coordinators in Serbia say they expect a daily influx of thousands of refugees and migrants to pass through their registration center in the Serbian town of Preševo. However, as winter approaches, they said that it will become complicated as they expect to have many medical cases to deal with.
Right now we have so much new arrivals. Yesterday from Macedonia there's almost 10,000 people enter. And it was crowded. The registration process is going on. Of course, it's a little bit slowed down, 2 to 3 hours. And today we are also expecting another 10,000, according to our statistics.
Officials say that tourism in Egypt will suffer a serious blow as visitors race to leave after the October 31st plane incident. Investigators suspect that a bomb detonated in the plane after it had left the airport, killing all 244 on board. And the United Nations has warned that Burundi is not equipped to deal with the escalating violence there. About 200 people have died and tens of thousands more have fled the country since President Pierre Nkurunziza sought and won a third term in office.
The High Commissioner, our entire office.
Russia's anti-doping agency RUSADA has suspended its operations and closed its office in Moscow. This after the World Anti-Doping Agency released a report that alleges systematic doping cover-ups in Russia. WADA also recommended that the country's track and field athletes be suspended from official competition. The anti-doping agency has denied the accusations of state-sponsored doping, saying that the claims are far-fetched and unverified. And finally this evening, a team of 200 people from Barcelona created a human tower in Shanghai that reached the height of a 2-story building. This was part of the first Barcelona-Catalonia Cultural Week that ended on Saturday. Human tower building, known as castells or castles in English, date back to the 18th century. Participants step on the backs and shoulders of their partners, as you see there. The heaviest at the bottom and the lightest at the top. 9-year-old Kaya was the final climber on Saturday's Castel, and there she goes. And there is more on these and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And of course, please feel free to join us on Twitter and Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela, my name is Reagan Devines. Have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow.